If you are a senior leader in healthcare right now, you're probably working really hard. I imagine you're tracking all the numbers, maybe launching improvement plans, responding to the data that you see, and trying to change things that don't seem to want to move. And here's what I want to say to you before anything else. I see your effort. I know you care. And the frustration you feel when the numbers don't seem to show up the way they should, that's also real. So here's what I've seen across healthcare organizations of all sizes. Most of the effort that you're putting in is going to the right problem. It's just going to the wrong layer of it. The retention strategy is aimed at the retention numbers. The communication training is aimed where the communication breakdown is at. The culture program is aimed at the culture. But none of these things are where the problem actually started. And until we look at where it started, the same problems are going to keep coming back. And it's not because we haven't been putting in effort, but because the interventions are hitting at the wrong place. So this is episode number 8. This is where the full Leadership Performance Cascade comes together. And this is where I want to show you something that I think will change how you look at your data from now on. So just in case you've missed them, links to episode 1 to 7 are in the description box below if you're just joining me. So what is the performance layer? Your performance data is not the problem. Your retention numbers, your patient satisfaction scores, your staff absenteeism rates, and your financial variances, those are real things and they're important. And of course, they need to be tracked and responded to, but they are not where the problem lives. That is where the problem shows up and becomes visible. So by the time the pattern shows up on your dashboard, it's already been moving through your organization for quite some time, maybe even years, working its way down through 6 layers before it starts to show in your data. So when we aim all of our energy at the performance layer, we're essentially trying to fix at the end of a very long sequence without addressing anything at the beginning of it, which is at the real root cause. So that's why things improve temporarily and then seem to go back to how they were. And it's not because people aren't putting in the effort, because they certainly are, but because the input has not changed and only the output itself was addressed. Performance is not the problem. It is proof that there's a problem that exists upstream, and upstream is where the real work lives. So let me walk you through the full cascade, all 7 layers in sequence. And as we go through each one, I want you to think about your own organization, not necessarily in a critical way, just as an observer. So layer 1 is leadership identity. I talk about this in episode 2. This is the most upstream layer in the whole system. It is the pattern where a leader takes on responsibility that maybe should belong to others. The leader maybe who avoids conflict to keep the peace, a leader who feels like they need to be the one with all the answers. These patterns are usually invisible to the person carrying them, but they are completely visible to everyone around them. And the organization slowly and gradually learns to operate inside of that identity. Layer 2 is leader regulation. So and this is in episode 3, so whether a leader absorbs the pressure or passes it on. When urgency lives at the top of the system, it travels downward. Teams then shift from strategy and thinking to being reactive. And then strategic thinking gets replaced by just getting through the day. And nobody wants to choose this. It's simply what happens when too much pressure sits at one layer for too long. Layer 3 is psychological safety. And this I talk about in episode 4. This is whether people feel genuinely safe to speak honestly. And I'm not talking about the policy version of safe. I'm talking about the real version. This is based on what I've actually seen happen version. When safety is low, real information stops moving upward, Problems stay hidden until they become crises. And then silence in meetings gets interpreted as agreement when it actually might be self-protection. Layer 4 is communication layer. And I talk about this in episode 5. What actually travels up through the organization. And by the time information reaches the executive table, it's maybe filtered at every layer it passes through. And leaders are often making important decisions on a picture that might be missing the most important pieces. And they do not know what they do not know. Layer 5 is culture layer. I talk about that in episode 6. This is not the values on the wall, the actual pattern of what gets tolerated. And I'm talking like what gets rewarded, what gets ignored, and what gets punished. Culture is the output of the 4 layers above it, and it cannot change. And the culture change will not stick until those 4 layers shift. Layer 6 is the decision layer, and I talk about that in episode 7. Whether executive decisions hold or stick when they leave the meeting, whether the team is actually genuinely aligned or maybe just aligned on paper. When decisions break apart at this layer, the organization below learns to wait, to hedge, to not commit until they see which version of this decision is going to stick. And that instinct shows up in every performance measure. And then layer 7 that we're talking about today, this is the performance layer. This is the numbers you see in your dashboard. This is the real numbers, important stuff worth responding to. And this is the last stop on a very long journey that started at the identity layer. Your dashboard is not showing you where the problem started. It is showing you where it ended up. And these are very different places. So what do we do with this? The shift that I'm inviting here is not about working harder. It's about working at a different layer. So instead of asking, how do we fix our retention numbers? We start asking, what layer of the cascade is producing the experience that's making people want to leave? So instead of asking, why is our culture not changing? We start asking, what are the 4 layers above the culture layer doing that we have not examined yet? Instead of asking, why is execution or those decisions breaking down? We start asking, did that decision actually stick once it left the meeting? These are different questions. They lead to different interventions, and they produce results that actually stick. Is absenteeism climbing? Trace it upstream. Is patient satisfaction dipping repeatedly? Trace it upstream. Is there budget numbers? Is there variances that you can't seem to explain? Trace them upstream. The cascade gives you the map. The performance data simply tells you something is wrong. The upstream layers tell you where. So the skill that changes everything is learning to look at a performance number and not asking, how do we fix this? But what in our system design or architecture is producing this? I want to be honest about what changes and what does not. The external pressures in healthcare are not going away. Of course, we have workforce shortages, funding constraints, regulatory demands, public pressure, all of that is just, it stays. But what changes is the internal drag in the system. When leadership architecture is unclear, it adds unnecessary pressure to those other pressures. It generates friction or stress or issues that did not have to exist. It asks people to carry more than what they really need to, and it produces the instability that you are seeing in your data. So when the upstream layers shift, when identity is clear and responsibility distributes properly, and people can actually lead, when regulation is stable, urgency stops spreading, and actually space to think comes back. When safety is real, honest information flows, and decisions get better. The performance layer moves, and it's definitely doesn't happen overnight. These are slow systems, but it can be done sustainably in a way that does not require a new improvement plan every 6 months, because the design or architecture producing those numbers has actually changed. So you do not fix the data by working on the data. You fix it by redesigning what's producing it. And that starts at the top of the cascade, not at the bottom. So this is the full Leadership Performance Cascade. 7 layers, 1 system, 1 direction of flow. If something in this series has really touched you or landed for you, if you've been watching and thinking about your own organization, I want to invite you to take the next step. The Leadership Systems Clarity Review is a one-to-one conversation, just you and I. We look at your organization through the cascade lens. We identify which layers producing the instability or the problem that you're seeing, and then we get clear on where to intervene. And right now, these are available at no cost as part of my MBA research. And I work only with senior healthcare leaders who have organizational decision authority. And this opportunity closes at the end of June 2026. You can apply at dianegoodmanson.com, and I will leave the link for you below. The next 4 episodes apply this cascade to some specific problems in healthcare organizations that you deal with every single day, such as staff retention, executive misalignment or accountability, middle management pressures, and what stability actually looks like. So thank you for being here, and I will see you on the next video.